Remember when Elon Musk launched a roadster into space several years ago? Well, it turns out the Tesla and SpaceX CEO is not the only automaker interested in the stars. And while they're not launching any cars into space, the Porsche family and Japanese car makers Toyota and Honda are some of the automakers investing in space technology.
And speaking of the sky, we are exploring rockets too. Because the future of mobility shouldn't be limited to just Earth.
The fact that car companies
That is interesting to me. I would say that there's probably some level of overlap. Obviously, there are combustion engines that are predominantly what most vehicles use, and so you must have a reasonable amount of folks who understand combustion and the mechanics of it. And so that should theoretically, and obviously propulsion, and so that should somewhat translate to rockets, but I'm not sure if that's that close of a jump. I'm not sure if that makes as much sense to me. Maybe they'll share more, but some of these companies, like we have covered how some automotive companies have really been struggling in the last couple of years to like find their niche and how they differentiate from each other in the automotive space. I can't imagine that they're just looking at rockets and saying like, yeah, for sure we can do that better than anyone else. Obviously Elon Musk does it, but we see how that has varying levels of success across some of the things that he does. So it's very curious to me that I didn't think there's that much demand for rockets that they are going to invest in having rockets as like a side business for these automotive companies, but maybe they'll elaborate on that more.
are investing in rocket ventures is a little bit of a head scratcher at first glance, at least. I think the primary
Yeah, what that guy said.
reason they're doing it is that it allows them to see frontier technologies in application and take those learnings and put them into their core products.
In January, Toyota, through its mobility software subsidiary, announced that it was investing $44 million into Japanese rocket maker Interstellar Technologies. Interstellar Technologies, which was founded in 2013 and has raised around $200 million from private funds and government subsidies, is focused on building rockets to launch satellites into space.
Automotive industries, you need like maps from space. Then those connectivities are all coming from satellites. So that is the reason why we need to develop those launch vehicle. In Japan, cadence is really limited. So someone needs to have that kind of connectivities to space. That is our company's goal.
Japan is playing catch-up when it comes to launch capacity. In 2024, Japan launched just 7 orbital rockets, compared to the 145 rockets launched by the US and 68 launched by China. Experts say automakers may be able to help and get some benefits in return.
Toyota has obviously a great deal of expertise in assembly lines, in improving efficiencies and manufacturing. And this is exactly the kind of thing that space companies and launch companies in particular want to gain access to. They want to be able to produce those launch vehicles as efficiently and as cheaply as possible because
That seems somewhat reasonable to me. Again, I think this goes back to there's some overlap of like combustion happening here, but just based off of the fact of manufacturing, that seems like a stretch to me. I'm not sure what you all are thinking. Feel free to post it in the comments below, but automotive companies aren't the only manufacturing companies, and they're certainly not the only vehicle manufacturing companies that exist. Like, why wouldn't you consider boat manufacturers as opposed to automotive manufacturers? They also have engines, they are larger, you also have to worry about pressure, etc., which is a little bit closer, so that seems more like a stretch to me. I'm not sure if I'm seeing the obvious connection here of just having manufacturing, and of course that's just looking at those types of manufacturing. There's manufacturing of so many other things that exist that if you just needed manufacturing expertise, it doesn't even necessarily need to come from the automotive space. It could come from anywhere.
That's how they're going to gain market share.
Interstellar Technologies says it's been working with Toyota since 2020, with the automaker even sending some of its engineers to aid the startup.
We have been collaborating with Toyota in terms of production and also propulsion system. Those engineers really help to develop Interstellar's propulsion system.
Toyota's venture capital arm, Toyota Ventures, was also an early investor in California-based startup Zona Space Systems, which aims to build a more precise satellite navigation system as an alternative to government-run satellite systems like the United States Global Positioning System, or GPS.
What are those satellites going to be used for, and what are they already being used for? Some of it is for improving navigation services for cars. Some of it's for mapping. If you think about what's going to be needed a little further down the road for autonomous vehicles, having full awareness of what's going on the road is incredibly valuable.
Meanwhile, Japanese automaker Honda's been working on developing a proprietary reusable rocket since 2019 to launch low Earth orbit satellites. The company said its aim was to incorporate its core technologies, including combustion engines and vehicle guidance, into the rocket's development. Honda declined CNBC's request for an interview, but in an emailed statement, the company said it plans to conduct a test of the rocket soon. Holding company Porsche SE, whose long-term core investments include German automakers Porsche and Volkswagen, have also invested in Munich-based rocket company Isar Aerospace. When the investment was announced in 2021, a member of Porsche SE's executive board wrote, "Access to space will be a key enabler for innovations in traditional industries, as well as for new and disruptive technologies and business models."
I think the first individual sort of referenced this, which is maybe this is like an R&D arm for these folks, which is inevitably for a company to be successful in the rocket space or satellite space, they're going to have to innovate, and then maybe trying to rapidly adopt those innovations for automotive or other aspects. That sounds a little bit more believable to me, in so much as like they're trying to like piggyback on their innovation, and because they're trying to solve different problems but are somewhat tangential, that maybe they can glean some insights into that, and that may help lead to further innovation on their side. That does make sense to me. I certainly follow that logic a lot better than the manufacturing one, just because there's so many alternatives. Like I said, boats, planes, submarines, I'm sure the list goes on. Of there could have been so many other manufacturers that could have gotten involved that might have been even more beneficial for the purposes of a rocket business. But I could see the opposite direction of maybe the rocket business is one of the more beneficial ones for supporting automotive R&D work and innovation.
Porsche SE also declined CNBC's request for an interview, and Toyota did not respond in time for publication. One big reason for all this investment in space: cars are becoming more and more connected, and automakers need the infrastructure to make that possible: satellites and the rockets needed to launch them. One recent report estimates that by 2030, connected vehicles could be a $742 billion per year revenue opportunity for automakers and suppliers. Today, cars use satellite connectivity for tracking and location, software updates, and entertainment like satellite radio.
In the smartphone world, Apple is shifting from a single device sale to additional services that can be provided throughout the life of that device. So for a car, it's the same deal. Once you sell that car, are there additional revenue streams that you can get by providing services? Some of those services can be delivered from space.
One such service is
I feel like I'm just going to keep disagreeing with that one individual. I feel like something similar happened in the game industry, where they had a similar problem, and they had been looking at how to solve this with having like a single purchase, and how do you resell items, for instance, or how do you change the model. I think this is very difficult for a car because, one, cars are usually the second most expensive purchase most people make in their lifetime, and especially with homes being more and more unaffordable, this might be the single most expensive purchase many people make in their lifetime, and that's it. They never make anything larger. And so for you to make a $10, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 purchase and then have to pay like some service fee to get maps on your car or something like that sounds like a stretch. I feel like there's certainly going to be very wealthy individuals, don't get me wrong, if you have like a luxury car and you're willing to pay 100K or 200 or 300K just to have the fanciest car, yeah, you probably don't care about tossing out like another $1,000 a month for, having the fanciest features in your car. But for the average individual, most people can barely pay for their car payment as is, never mind an additional subscription fee. And so this is one of those challenges where, as I was mentioning, like the game industry, there has been various experiments into how to do this. Like some people were looking into potentially like reselling the physical discs back in the day, etc. And so there aren't really that many options of business models where you purchase or pay up front a fairly large expense, and then you also pay like an ongoing fee. I don't think that's been found to be a successful model, and that's at a way lower price point. We're probably talking like $50-$60 for a game, and then maybe like $5 to $10 for a subscription. And so it seems odd to me that, again, this has been such an unsuccessful model in other areas that you would be looking to do this at a way higher scale, where you're maybe talking 50,000 for the vehicle and then maybe like $1,000 for a subscription. And then I also don't see the point of charging a small fee. Like if you're going to charge someone like $1, that's probably just going to be more annoying than anything else. You're probably just going to go to another automotive manufacturer who doesn't charge you that $1 a month. So like it's probably going to have to be a noticeable expense for it to be worth their time. And then there also is going to have to be a noticeable amount of value that you get from that thing. And also it's going to be something that you have to differentiate yourself from somebody else. So it can't be like a normal feature that any other car has.
Is subscriptions to advanced driver assistance systems. Take General Motors Super Cruise, which uses cameras, sensors, and real-time location and map data from GPS satellites to allow the vehicle to do things like automatically steer and keep the car centered in a lane.
Our customer-focused strategy with Super Cruise is to continuously refine and expand its capabilities to make it indispensable. This is how we are setting the stage for recurring high-margin revenue streams from subscriptions.
Wow. I guess they did technically go for a high-value option, so I do give them credit for that, but still seems like a bad idea to me. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this will be the new thing in automotive, which is like you have to pay for updates to software that exists in your car. That sounds pretty outrageous to me. I would assume it'd be much more lucrative, and especially like, let's go with the hyper-rich example here again. One, I don't know if even most people, at least in America, are driving cars that self-drive in any serious capacity. And so basically almost all of the vehicles outside on the market today don't have this feature. So if there was one brand that did this, you could just buy literally any other car, used or new, and it wouldn't have that problem. The other one would be you would have to have that functionality on a car when you bought it. So even if you pay for the subscription for updates, you presumably would have to increase how frequently you make updates such that it's warranted for the subscription. And that sounds dangerous. Like I wouldn't want somebody updating code that goes to my car for safety purposes, like every week, just so that they can scam me into paying a subscription fee. And so if you're going to have an update that's fairly infrequent, I would hope at least no frequent than like maybe a month or a quarter. So you're probably going to get a handful or a dozen of updates throughout a year, and they're probably not going to be that substantial if they're that frequent. When you could just have a car that's pretty new and just plan to swap it out. I don't think the average person, while I disagree that they probably should hold onto a car longer, I think the average individual holds onto a car maybe like no more than 3 or 4 years. And so if your vehicle is slightly out of date, you're just going to get a new one, and that car will have the up-to-date information. You don't need to get a subscription for it. So that seems silly, but maybe that feature does seem prevalent enough that maybe somebody who's very rich would pay for the latest features that exist.
5 years, we expect to approach about $2 billion in total annual revenue from Super Cruise.
Other car makers, including Mercedes, Toyota, and Ford, have similar connected driver assistance systems. Meanwhile, Chinese automaker and Tesla competitor Geely Holding Group has invested $326 million to manufacture its own satellites to support the build-out of its autonomous vehicles.
For car companies on the autonomous driving side, sometimes the precision that they need for that is even higher than what is available from the government-run constellation. So there are some space companies that provide what are called enhanced positioning and navigation services. And so this is another area that the car companies could simply invest in themselves so that they can make the claim that their autonomous driving is 10% safer or 15% more efficient or whatever they want to say, and that is their competitive edge.
Access to satellites can also allow drivers to remain connected to the internet in places where cellular services are unavailable.
If you can have that connectivity no matter where you are, as long as you have a clear view of the sky, then that is potentially a valuable service.
Quincy Edmund Lee has seen the benefits that come from aerospace and automotive collaboration firsthand. Before founding his EV charging company, Electric Era, in 2020, Lee spent a number of years at SpaceX, working on the company's Crew Dragon, Falcon 9, and Starlink satellite projects.
In 2016, I went and toured the Tesla factory in Fremont. We had a number of cross collaborations around taking those production best practices and imbuing.
Hopefully, they're obviously going to talk about what they actually learned here, but I hope that other companies aren't just doing this so they can like pretend that they're like Tesla. That seems to be ridiculous to me, that their entire premise would be Tesla does it, they're into space, or Elon Musk is into space and cars, so therefore I have to be into space and cars. Seems like such an arbitrary decision. So hopefully they did find some meaningful improvements here. But again, I would assume if you're actually trying to advance and push the boundaries of your field for any fields, especially ones that both have manufacturing, some type of engineering behind it, like you're probably going to have learnings from both of those companies that could be exchanged. I still haven't heard exactly what makes cars so perfect for space as being the alternative. I was pretty sure Elon Musk didn't do this because he thought this was like a match made in heaven and automotive and rockets just always go together and nobody realized. I'm pretty sure this is just because he thought electric vehicles should exist and that people would pay for very expensive luxury electric vehicles, and that he just personally wanted to go to space. Like, I don't think there was no master plan that was behind all this move. I think he literally was just like, I want to be at Mars, so I'm going to make a rocket. I don't think that they had this connection, so hopefully they do highlight some very meaningful ones. If they make some minor comments, I'll be a little disappointed.
Them into SpaceX, and then occasionally throughout the years as well for battery programs or solar programs, Tesla and SpaceX would intermediate and talk about things like degradation curves for battery cell chemistries that we use on the Starlink satellite, or the cell technologies that are used on the solar array for the satellite.
In fact, SEC 5.
That seems minor to me. That's pretty disappointing. Battery life and solar panels, that's what they spoke about. That was the entire premise that set off multiple companies to invest millions and millions of dollars, is because Elon Musk had two companies that both used batteries. Like, that seems like such a stretch to me.
Filings show that SpaceX paid Tesla around $5 million in 2020 for various services, car parts, energy products, and software.
In some cases, it goes the other direction, that the space companies have figured out.
And also, Elon having one company that pulls money from another company, again, doesn't justify the idea. That could just be one company was having a rough quarter, and so he just offset the profits on one, or something along those lines, or offset some of their excess materials to the other company, and they just needed a line item to justify it, because you can't just have one business literally hand it over to another one if they're supposed to be independent entities. So they had to officially make it a sale. So this could literally have just been, I want to move $5 million over and I just need something to justify that shift. So again, still feels loose to me. I don't know what you're all thinking, but post it in the comments below if you have thoughts on whether this sounds like a good idea to you.
A process for doing something that then can be scaled up into large-scale manufacturing.
An example of a technology that's been adopted from the aerospace industry to the automotive industry is 3D printing, also known as additive manufacturing. In the automotive world, Porsche has used 3D printing to make spare parts for its classic cars, as well as pistons and car seats for its current cars. Another technology crossover? LiDAR.
When you look at the technology that is needed for landing spacecraft on the moon or on Mars, there's a system called LiDAR that uses lasers to detect how close an object is and how rapidly you're approaching that object. And so we've seen some of that LiDAR technology being transferred from the space industry into the vehicles themselves so that they can be more aware of their surroundings and generate
3D printing took me a little farther away. Again, he seems to be so big about manufacturing. Why wouldn't you just partner with a 3D printing company? Seems like the most beneficial. You could tell them how that system doesn't work adequately for your needs, and then they could fix it so that way you can get better 3D printing. That sounds like a way closer and direct partnership. LiDAR a bit, but again, seems like a stretch for me personally, but maybe I'm just being too skeptical of why these businesses would work together, or at least why these businesses in particular should work together versus anything else.
be safer as autonomous vehicles.
Lee says EV charging infrastructure could also benefit from space technology.
One of the ways that we're looking to improve our charging stations is actually adding Starlink to every one of our charging stations, basically to get better data, uplink and downlink data access. We'll have some of our charging stations only being able to get 10 kilobytes of data, and that makes troubleshooting or pushing over-the-air updates more challenging. So adding a Starlink terminal completely solves that problem.
Aside from
That was a bit more believable. So basically, but this is just for charging stations where if you have a charging station, you're going to want to put it somewhere that is convenient for people to drive, and especially thinking about maximizing the distance that a car can go just off of the charge that they have. So that might not necessarily be in the most convenient place for Wi-Fi or internet connectivity. So having a Starlink system or satellite internet of some sort that allows it to gain data, that allows you to gain better insights and more communication to that location, that sounds like some decent overlap. But again, that's a very niche aspect of an automotive company for this one thing to kind of be relevant for.
sharing manufacturing know-how and mutual technologies, automotive and space companies can also share personnel, something that Tesla and SpaceX have been known to do.
At our company, Electric Era, we have approximately 6 engineers that have gone up from Starlink to Electric Era, mainly in the design and production space.
Still, experts point out that while investing millions into space ventures may seem like a lot, it's a drop in the bucket for large car makers. But the investment could be just the start to a growing trend.
The amounts that automakers are investing in space companies are still very small by automotive standards. So the investments are being made primarily for strategic reasons. If the automakers are really looking to the future and thinking about what will be possible and what they can have a hand in creating, then space is a natural domain for them to explore.
Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed what you've seen, please hit like or subscribe. I'll see you around.